Episode 7 of the MGM Plus original horror show, From, has released, and everybody put your hands up if you're ready for some more disturbing visuals and character tensions. I'm gonna be upfront with all of you when I say this is probably my least favorite episode in the season so far. The only plot lines that actually get any kind of development are Fatima's and Elgen's. But I am happy that Elgen's storyline is getting some more time in the spotlight. There's a lot of untapped story and mystery that we haven't really explored too much. As far as Fatima's plotline goes, some of my theories from the last episode actually get brought up. You know, the ones of her being pregnant but the machine can't detect it, or maybe she's the one that's actually changing. Those actually get brought up in the show. So the fact that I'm on the same wavelength as the characters shows that I know my stuff when it comes to theorizing. But I don't mean to brag. Before we get to those two, I want to bring up a particular character that we haven't talked about too much since she hasn't gotten a whole lot of screen time, that being the police officer from the ambulance in episode 5. Her name is Officer Aosta, I think. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm just going to say Aosta and hope it's correct. Towards the start of the episode, we see her standing in what is presumably Nikki's grave as she's sort of grappling with what she's done. But then almost immediately after, we see her go to the diner and whine to Kenny about how much of a dick Boyd is, and it's just like a sudden flip of emotions. I get that anger is part of the 5 stages of grief or whatever, but this sudden 180 is just so out of the blue. Luckily, Kenny's character stays consistent, and he also gets to give her the adapt or survive talk, which we've seen a couple of times. And even though Kenny's been through a lot, it's cool to see him have a little bit of seniority in this place, since, you know, he's been through a lot and he understands mostly how the basics work. And after Officer Aosta leaves the diner crying like a wham-wham baby about how Boyd took her gun, the bus driver from Season 2 comes into the diner and brings up the idea of reopening the diner. I actually really like this idea, since the diner has always been a place of comfort and community for all of the townsfolk, both in the town and colony house, and it would just be a really nice way to honor Tien Chen's memory. But getting back on track, Aosta sneaks into the sheriff's station and demands that Boyd give her gun back. And I'm gonna be honest, the acting in this scene, particularly on Acosta's actress's side, the acting is not the greatest. And it also feels like the writers just kind of forgot who Boyd's character was in this scene, because he starts acting and saying all these really arrogant and egotistical things, which is just not who his character is at all. Has Boyd been arrogant in the past? Yes, but he has people to keep him in check, and if he follows through with his arrogance, he learns from it. He's not just a naturally arrogant person. Does he get angry and explode sometimes too? Yeah, absolutely, and it's usually for a good reason. But has Boyd ever put himself up on like a pedestal and not used any semblance of logic or reason to deal with a difficult situation? No, absolutely not. Boyd throughout this season and throughout a lot of the show has consistently put the townsfolk ahead of himself. That's just who he is. But it seems like in this scene the writers just forgot that entirely. I don't know, but this scene between Aosta and Boyd and just their whole dynamic as characters, it feels like they turn into completely different characters when they're in a scene together. In every other scene that Boyd is in this episode, from his talk with Christy, to his son, to Donna, he feels and acts like Boyd. But not in this scene, so I don't know what the hell happened here. Moving on, let's talk about Elgen, this sympathetic boy who has a darkness lurking over his shoulder. As we see him making a present for Fatima after how gloomy and dreary she was in the last episode, the camera that he found takes a photo on its own, and the photo is revealed to show that cellar that we've seen before, the same cellar that Jade had his first vision in all the way back in Season 1. And as he's checking it out, you know, he doesn't find all too much, but as he's like, maybe there's nothing here, he hears a knock, seemingly from inside the wall. And this man does the simplest, but the biggest brain play I have ever seen when it comes to this cellar. He just moves the cabinet out of the way. How has no one else thought to try that? There's this hidden room that, at least to me, reads like a place that people used to hide during the pre-talisman era. There's a corpse, there's a bed, some other miscellaneous objects, and of course, the drowned woman. And Elgen decides to ask her, is this where it really happens? Where what happens? I don't really understand what Elgen is asking her or why he's asking her that. What is the thing that really happens here? It was just a little bit confusing. But I imagine it's something we'll learn or see in the next episode. Moving on to Fatima, a good 45% of her screen time in this episode is just kind of more of the same, her being scared, her being angry, etc. But as I mentioned earlier, Ellis and Fatima both bring up some of the theories that I had the last time I talked about this show. That being, maybe the machine can't see the baby, or maybe Fatima is the one who's changing. Fatima's been measuring herself, which is a detail that gets revealed in this scene, and it's revealed that she is growing to some capacity. You know, her body is getting bigger, so something is happening to her physically. I think it's a tiny bit ambiguous right now. There's not enough information at the moment. But, as Boyd and Donna point out, maybe Fatima's heading in the direction of Abby, aka Boyd's wife, who kind of lost her mind and thought that this place was just a dream, and decided to wake everyone up using the barrel of a gun. So naturally, Donna is like, I want Fatima and Ellis to leave Colony House temporarily until whatever's happening is sorted out. Gotta think about everyone. And when Boyd is like, okay, I'll go get the sheriff's station ready or whatever, oh boy. Donna is going to regret saying to him, it doesn't have to be today. She's really going to regret that. And a little bit later on, we see some more of those disturbing visuals I talked about. Not like episode 5 ending disturbing, but still pretty disturbing. I'll blur it, but Fatima's basically having a nightmare. It's not really clear if this is actually happening or not. But basically, her lower abdomen and just her stomach starts getting sucked in and compressed underneath her rib cage. And you know, again, it's no episode 5, but it's a really nasty visual. It's not nice to look at. Again, it's hard to tell if this is actually happening or not because Fatima wakes up in the exact same spot it was happening, and it happens later out in the gardening shack when Fatima goes to get some normal food. And luckily, old Tilly is there, the old lady who I'm still convinced is evil. Luckily, she's there to help out Fatima, be like, hey, you okay? You know, everything's good? And Fatima just fucking stabs Tilly with a gardening tool. Oh, I'm sorry, but I couldn't help but laugh a little bit during this scene. Not because the death is funny or because, any of this is funny, but all my brain could register in that moment was, you touch me, you die. Oh man, that was definitely not the right takeaway from that scene, but I just couldn't help but laugh a little bit because my brain was like, you touch me, I kill you. So I guess Tilly wasn't evil. I guess she was just a sweet old lady who was kind of dying. So I'm sorry for calling you evil. As we all know, murder has consequences in this show. We have the box, we have getting locked up in the basement of a church, we have being banished, all sorts of stuff. If the theory that Fatima is the drowned woman, which we've had a few snippets that might be leaning into this idea, if that is the case, it wouldn't surprise me that if in the next episode or just whenever Donna and Boyd are sort of deciding what to do about this murder, it wouldn't surprise me if Elgen walked in and was like, hey, I have a potential solution, and then he brings Fatima to the cellar. I'm not 100% confident this is definitely what's going to happen, but if the Fatima being the drowned woman theory is accurate, then I'd say it's a likely possibility that that could happen. And that's kind of it for all the major plot developments and plot progressions and stuff. That's kind of all that happened of note in this episode. And we had a distinct lack of Jade, which really pissed me off. We see him for a little bit at the settlement when Ethan and Tabitha want to go there to investigate Tabitha's dreams or whatever, and Jade accuses Aristotle of getting it wrong, which I think is a very Jade thing to do, accusing a old dead philosopher or mathematician of getting it wrong. He basically starts buying into the idea of fate a little bit, which season 1 Jade would never do in a million years. But now he's considering all the possibilities, and I kind of like that that's what Jade's character arc has been. Shows up very set in his ways, very confident that he understands the world and reality, but then when he's presented with the unknown and the mysterious and the unnatural, at first he refuses to accept it for the way it is, but then he slowly starts opening himself up to new possibilities and allowing himself to explore the unknown because that's the only way to make the unknown known. We also see Victor doing the bad cop act on Jasper, trying to get him to talk, and Henry, Victor's father, I completely missed that was his name, I don't know how I missed that, and Henry is just kind of moping around some more, feeling like a failed dad, which yeah, I get, but I think we could have done a little bit more with him in this episode, and Victor as well. Boyd and his son Ellis have a little heart-to-heart. Boyd and Christy have a little bit of a fight amongst all the confusion of the mystery of Fatima, and that's kind of it for this episode. From a writing standpoint, the 7th episode in a 10-episode season is where you really want to start moving things to a general conclusion of the season and or show if it's your final season. But not all that much happens in this episode. Jasper doesn't talk. We learn nothing new about the connection that Tabitha and Miranda had. We learn nothing new about the numbers in the bottle trees. And a lot of characters just feel kind of underutilized. This whole episode feels underutilized. Oh yeah, and then Julie and Randall also found themselves by that place where Boyd broke the music box, and Randall had some sort of reaction to it, and Julie also had some sort of feeling reaction to it, but then nothing happens. So it's like, why are we there? What was the point of all this? Now, I get that there has to be a fine balance of progression, but not revealing too much. But when you're approaching the end of a season in this kind of show, you want to start revealing potential payoffs, if that makes any sense. Just leave the viewers with some breadcrumbs that could lead them to a multitude of different conclusions, or maybe all of them are the correct conclusions. Maybe only one of them is. Maybe 2 or 3 of them are. Just give the viewers just a little bit more, just a couple more small clues that could lead to potential conclusions. And for the people who get it right, they're going to feel real good about themselves. There were some story progressions on plots like Elgen's, which we've seen very little of, but there were also tons of twisted and distorted character moments that didn't fit with how the characters have been written at all. Honestly, this episode was kind of a miss for me. You gotta take the good with the bad and vice versa sometimes, I guess. If I were to say what my favorite scene in the episode was, though, I'd say it's probably when Elgen finally has worked up the courage to actually speak to the drowned woman, because I think in almost, if not every single scene that she's appeared, Elgen hasn't spoken a word to her. He's just kind of freaked out and froze, but he's finally working up the courage and showing that he's some semblance of ready to understand whatever the hell it is she wants. But what did you think about this episode? Do you think that scene with Boyd and Aosta is completely out of line with their characters, or do you think I'm the idiot who doesn't have any kind of understanding of these characters at all? Either way, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to see what you all think. If you've been enjoying my coverage of From's 3rd season and just my content in general, consider dropping a sub. We're going for 10K by the end of the year, and remember, if we hit 10K by the end of the year, I will get my first tattoo in honor of all of you. How's that for a sub goal incentive? And if you want to show me a little bit of extra support, consider becoming a channel member. Not only do you directly support me, but you also get to see these videos a little bit early, as well as getting a whole bunch of other really cool rewards. Shout out to the members, absolute mad lads. But that's gonna do it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and yeah, have a good day, everyone.